He's gone, Chauncey.
Yes, I know, Robert. I've seen this before. It happens to old people.
Welcome back to the Harbor. I'm your host, the Kino Cowboy. I'm here with my co-host Scott Keith, like usual. Today, we're talking Being There, directed by Hal Ashby from 1979, starring Peter Sellers. Now, have you seen any Pink Panther movies before we continue?
No, I have seen Doctor Strangelove. That's what I think of first with Peter Sellers, and second I think of Pink Panther. But I haven't seen any of them. I didn't see the the Steve Martin one that was marketed to our generation.
Hamburger. Oh my God.
Hamburger. Yeah, that's all I remember of the ads is him not being
I
able
saw that one. I saw the original Pink Panther or whatever the movie. Actually, it's not called Pink Panther. Whatever the
Yeah,
original.
there's
first one
Return
was.
of the Pink Panther, but the first one I don't think is called that.
Yeah, the first one I saw. Okay, first of all, our friend Sumner grew up on these movies, and he would talk about them all the time as a kid. And my mom didn't think they were appropriate for me, I guess. But I watched the first one a few years ago, and I expected it to be just this overly zany kind of thing, and the first one wasn't as much. It was a little more grounded than I expected. But anyway, I might continue more Pink Panther movies. I don't know.
It's yeah, and the first one is called the Pink Panther.
Oh, it
Yeah.
is?
And the Pink Panther is the name of the diamond. It's not the name of Inspector Clouseau.
Well, yeah, I know, yeah.
Well, some people. I'm saying for the audience, just in case they've
Right.
seen being here and are watching this podcast, but are recording and aren't, you know, familiar with that. But I am very aware and very much a fan of Doctor Strangelove, though.
I'm glad I at least seen Doctor Strangelove in the first Pink Panther just to kind of have that perspective of what Peter Sellers normally does performance-wise before going into this, which is pretty stark.
It's no, and that's the point. It reminded me of Jim Carrey in his serious roles. Not because they're the same actors necessarily. I mean, there's some similarities, to be drawn, but I remember Jim Carrey saying when he was receiving direction for Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind that he has all this manic energy all the time, obviously. And the director was like, hey, take that energy and kind of like bottle it up and let it simmer under the surface and like let the steam, I don't know how he said, but like almost like letting the steam kind of flow out where it's not explosive, but you kind of see it. I almost feel that in this movie. Like he's suppressing his normal sort of like zaniness and it leads to this like very odd yet compelling, especially for the other characters in the movie, character. But also, I've also seen I think Peter Sellers was one of those guys who, like, in his regular life was more soft spoken because I was watching some clips of him in interviews on the Dick Cavett show and stuff. And I mean, he's not like I've also seen Jim Carrey on Oprah where he starts to weigh his own head on a scale. So, like, not everybody's wacky all the time. It needs to rein it in. But it was an Oscar nominated performance. Some people say it's his best, but it's like it's hard to judge that because it's so different. And like you're saying it's his best because it's his most against type, but is that actually his best performance? It's hard to it's impossible to say.
Certainly interesting. I went in pretty blind. I'd had it on my list for a while, and I just remember hearing, "Oh, it's Peter Sellers in a serious role. Pretty cool." All right, I'm gonna watch it. So going in, I was like, "Okay, this is a grown man who is watching Sesame Street. What's going on here?" But what I thought as the film progressed, I thought it was great that it never pinpoints his intelligence or like what exactly might be wrong with him. It could be a number of things. He can't read or write, but like it's not just like, oh, this man is severely autistic. He's Rain Man or something like that. It it allows you to keep guessing at what his limits are throughout the film when it comes to intelligence and how he might respond to any comment or question because you're still kind of wondering like, is there something we haven't seen yet before or not? But it's pretty consistent the whole movie.
It is like the character is consistent, and you have a good point. Like I never really felt like I knew how he was going to respond to things exactly. Like when he's at that party and he's talking to Russian dignitaries, and
Yeah.
there's that guy hitting on him and stuff. But and I think now I think they hint at his background more in the novel that this is based on. But it's one of those things where um it's like everybody in this movie, all the characters project whatever they want onto Chauncey, or Chance. I think his real name's Chance, but they mishear it as Chauncey, and he just goes
Yeah. He's like, ah, well, whatever.
whatever. Um, and I think it lets the audience do the same thing, and that's why it has that open ending, which we'll talk about. Because I do think people do that, and people do that certainly to celebrities and politicians. What this movie has plenty to say about.
It has
um
plenty to say, but uh to me, for the most part, the film is not trying to be smug or in your face with the
no,
political commentary, which I enjoyed. I felt like it was very honest with its comedy. That's
yeah,
really what, and it just led to a very pleasant, laid back viewing experience for me. Just like it was amusing, but it wasn't just like, ah, that's society, right?
yeah, it's funny. This whole movie's funny, and I would definitely call it a comedy, but I did not laugh out loud one time, which I don't laugh out loud a lot anyway. I think you're
Yeah, it's just more amusing.
yeah,
I'm
but
down with.
it was still comedic the entire time. Which I think it takes a lot of confidence as a entertainer and as a filmmaker to do that, to trust like, okay, this isn't gonna be like big laugh slapstick sort of stuff like normal. Just even though we might get some Peter Sellers fans, but you have to have the confidence like people are gonna meet this film where it is, and I think they did. It was successful. Um,
It would have been a mistake to try and turn this into like a Mr. Magoo kind of slapstick thing.
No, no,
There's a
absolutely.
few points where it gets a little too silly, but like not really. Like for the most part, it's pretty subdued.
Where does it get really silly for you?
It didn't really need to have that bit with the president being incompetent, not being able to get it up with his wife. I felt like that was just like, what is this? What are we doing
Yeah.
here?
No,
And then,
I don't I think it was just to like juxtapose it to um Chauncey, I guess, who's very like zen and just letting things happen. And then
yeah,
like women are all over him for multiple times in this movie. Like he's at that party
and
and
then,
people are and men. People are saying like he's sexy and stuff. And in my head, I'm like, is Chauncey sexy to some people? I don't like Peter
oh
Sellers.
yeah, these kinds of people, he's got this sophisticated look. I could see, they might find him distinguished,
Yeah,
and to them, that's sexy. So,
right. They're looking for something different than well, the chicks you and I talk to. Let's just say that
yeah,
we're
yeah.
not we're not hanging out in these circles. So they're looking more for like arm tattoos and stuff. But no, that is silly. I think Ebert actually, normally I don't read other reviews, but said that was silly. But I think it was trying to compare it to him. Although he's pretty disinterested in sex. Like, and it makes you wonder how much does he know what sex is? I don't think
No,
so.
I don't think so because he only watches daytime TV and they don't really show a lot of sex. Like he might know they get in bed together and maybe sleep, roll around or lay
Right.
on each other or something, but he doesn't know, I don't think.
It was, yeah, no, it was like when I was a kid and Like I knew sex was something to do with like getting naked together, and I just knew that from like
Yeah,
movies and The Sims.
vague concept.
Right.
But that leads to the very like fascinating perspective the more you think about it. Like this guy knows a lot about things, but also doesn't because it's very curated of what's shown on television, which leads to a lot of thoughts of your perception of reality yourself growing up with TV and stuff and how much it's based on that.
Right. Well, this movie reminded me a lot of another movie that we've covered on this show not too long ago, and that released 3 years prior to this, and that is Network. Because I think they're making similar commentary on like how vapid TV can be and our TV culture, uh, and also like what is the first generation of TV watchers doing? Now he's a bit older here, but it's like this is almost like a comical idea of like an old horn rimmed glasses English teacher who's anti television, like what she thinks will happen to young people if they just watch TV their whole lives. Like they'll be illiterate and bumbling around and, getting switch, like trying to turn off the switchblade with the remote when it's done, like, stupid stuff like that. But it's not, because it
Yeah,
is
but
one
it's
of
like
those things where like I immediately thought like at the beginning like, oh well, this guy's autistic, which I don't know. I think in '79 we knew about autism. I don't know how much the public knew about autism.
yeah.
Um, and if they did know about it, it wasn't good information. But it's one of these things like, how do you not learn how to read or write? Like
That's the weird part. And it's like, so you're not sure if he's physically able, or mentally able to learn reading or writing, but at that point, then the maid was well aware of this, and it's bizarre to me that she just was like, "Well, he's dead. I'm leaving." And it's like, wouldn't you want to make sure this guy that might be mentally disabled has stuff figured out?
dude, she did not care about that white boy anymore. She was sick of these white people. I'm not even joking. That's like she has a scene about it later in the movie where she's like, it's a white man's world. All you gotta be to succeed in America is be
I
white.
guess she didn't have a full grasp on his, I don't know, on how dumb or incapable of learning he was. I don't know.
Right. Or just thought he would do okay because he's white. I wrote down the quote. She said, because she's seeing him on TV, and,
Yeah.
and when she's like hanging out with people, she's like, it's for sure a white man's world in America. He never learned to read and write, no brains at all, shortchanged by the Lord and dumb as a jackass. Look at him now. All you got to be is white in America to get whatever you want. Um, which is crazy. So, I mean, apparently she had no connection to this family. She was just, and she might have been like one housekeeper for multiple families, that was just one of her clients. I don't know. I'm not rich enough to have a housekeeper. I don't know how
I
their
don't
hours.
know. I feel like this is the only point in the movie where I felt like it got a little too in your face with commentary. I don't know. I feel like
Yeah, because
she didn't need to say all that for the image to be clear. She could have, I think it would have been more comedic if she would have been like, you would have seen on her face, like, oh, it's him, he's on TV, and maybe like comment about like, how did he get on this TV? And then, I don't know, maybe have like a shot of her just kind of shaking her head, like, I
yeah,
can't
like
believe he got
I
there.
keep thinking of when they got Pavarotti or whatever tied up in Naked Gun, and then Frank Drebin is like butchering the Star Spangled Banner with his name, and he's like watching in horror as he's tied up. It should be more like that. There also should have been a tiger in this movie, but I digress.
I have to assume, at least I assume that Chauncey might have been like the son of the rich man who died in the house. I mean, I
I
don't
think
see
I
what other connection it might be.
No, and I think that's the implication. I think it's more implied in the novel. By the way, just while I'm at it, even with the housekeeper like saying that stuff about the white man at the beginning, when you see him doing like exploring the city for the first time, it says there's graffiti that says America ain't shit because the white man's got a God complex,
Yeah.
that he walks by. So like,
Uh-oh. I think you cut out. I think it's back.
okay, he like he walks out into the hood in DC, wherever this is. I've never been to DC, so I don't really know. I certainly haven't been to DC in 1979. But it's makes me think even more of like, well, this guy had this like estate, this like brownstone or whatever the equivalent is,
Yeah.
Nice townhome, probably a millionaire, not a billionaire like the people we meet later, but like, so like, why is he living? Is it like just urban decay? Like this used to be a nice neighborhood 30 years ago, and over time, because of like zoning and segregation and stuff, like poor people just got shoved there. Like what happened, to
Yeah.
the but it's already making the commentary there that he's clearly like a white guy who I saw a deleted scene. He's watching black kids play basketball, and he's like, I've seen your game before. I've seen it on the television, stuff like that. There's the credits where Peter Sellers is cracking up, breaking character because he keeps having to talk jive in character.
Yeah.
It keeps cracking him up, which we'll get to that. And
Yeah, I think it's interesting that like this guy was dying, possibly his father, and he didn't have anything in place to like any attorneys or anyone like a caregiver or somebody to come in and be like, okay, he's passed, but he's left you this money to live on so we can pay caregivers to take care of you or something.
right, it's a weird. It makes me almost wonder more about his caregiver than it does, or about his whoever that man was.
Yeah.
Does Chauncey, because we at least see Chauncey, even though he's an enigma through the movie, we know he's supposed to be. But it's like, even if you had like an illegitimate son or something that you wouldn't want people to see,
Yeah.
it's like, why would you not take care of it? Is there something wrong with you?
There has to be. He had to be like some sort of extreme hermit or something to not allow
Like
his
a
son
Halloween
to ever
style.
go out
Yeah.
ever and to wear old ass recycled suits from the 30s and 40s and stuff.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
such a bizarre scenario.
I think those were just hand me downs,
Yeah.
but so he didn't have to buy new stuff. But no, it's completely bizarre. He doesn't know how to cook anything. Like he's completely like dependent on other people for food. He's like, oh yes, I don't even think we see him prepare his own glass of water in this.
Yeah, it's really strange,
It's really strange.
but it provides for a very fascinating
Yeah,
uh
because
story,
we've been talking
obviously.
about it in the past 10 minutes. And it's
I
like,
know, but it's just like such a specific scenario. And like
right.
and it's so funny because like neither the FBI or the CIA can make any heads or tails of it.
Yeah, because he has no, there's no paper trail.
He's like
Like,
the Joker.
yeah, exactly. I was thinking that. I was thinking he's like the Joker, like custom suits. We don't know where the came from. Stuff like that. I mean, I guess that used to happen where like you were just born in a barn, and so there was no like birth certificate or anything, and there's like, all right. And then if you need a birth certificate, you'd be like, hey, I was born, obviously. I don't know why I need a birth certificate to prove to people who I am, because I'm already here. I was born. I wasn't lab grown. Um,
Maybe this guy was just, yeah, maybe he was an illegitimate son and also mentally handicapped, and this guy was like embarrassed by that or something, which would be
and
fucked.
and maybe I mean, it seems like he dies of old age, because if this is a son, I mean, Peter Sellers is old. This is like one of his last movies. I think it would have been his last, but there's some
Some shitty movie, yeah.
Fu Manchu movie. Yeah, the fiendish plot of Dr. Fu Manchu.
How embarrassing.
Uh yeah.
That was sad though. Yeah, he died like a year later from a heart attack.
Um yeah, because Sellers was already old at this. So it's one of those things, like, even if he did die unexpectedly, did he have like no estate drawn up? Or would that means he would have to talk to his lawyers about his son, and then he would have to expose it. So
Real question. Yeah, because it's the 70s. maybe this guy's just severely autistic, but no one knew enough about it to really understand it because he does have a nice and comparable knowledge of gardening and is taking care of the gardening, and that's what he loves, which is a trait.
Right. A real hyperfixation.
Yeah.
I was talking earlier. It's one of my pet peeves is calling everything a hyperfixation, for the audience out there. And so that's a real hyperfixation, not
Yeah.
just a fixation. Or like, oh, I'm not focused, I'm hyper focused. It's like, no,
This is
you're
my
just
whole life is eat. It's like SpongeBob when Squilliam comes to the Krusty Krab and it's supposed to be fancy and he says, "All I know is fine dining and breathing."
yeah, he deletes everything else from his friend. Yeah, this guy just
Yeah.
knows TV and gardening.
Yeah.
That's it. Um,
And he's very
but
particular, but it's still like a toss up, especially when those people come in, I guess attorneys or whatever, to look at the estate and he's still there and he says, "Oh, well, I sleep facing the north." And the guy's like, "Well, wait a minute, this is west." So,
yeah, and you can see his entire like worldview. Like he keeps his composure, but you see his entire like world crumble. He's like, oh,
yeah.
uh, how's he supposed to know? Because I went completely blind into this movie, and like when he drops the line, "I've never been allowed outside of the house." I wrote that in all caps in my notes. I was just like, it's one of these. Because there are like, and it's more extreme than this. There are cases like you hear about in your psychology classes and like your psych 101, of like Jeannie who was just like locked in an attic for her whole life, but she never really acquired language, but she was like severely abused, like wasn't just like locked in an attic, wasn't like talked to or um given TV to watch or anything.
Yeah.
Like, he's kind of like Chauncey is kind of like Sloth from Goonies, who's like chained watching TV in that the whole time.
I'll
And
tell you what, once I realized what this movie was and the more I watched it, it like hit me like a brick of, and I am willing to put money on this that Lynch must have been heavily influenced on this movie for Twin Peaks: The Return because the whole A plot of The Return is Dougie Jones being in this kind of scenario, except he wanted to take it up a notch and make Dougie Jones just not like Dougie Jones can't even perceive reality because he was in the Black Lodge for so long. But he does like repeat things back in the show and like people take that as him agreeing and that happens in this, and it's just I feel like Dougie Jones came from this movie a lot, even though it's a more like amplified Lynchian version of that.
yeah, it's more to do with tulpas and
Yeah,
weird doppelgangers and
but
stuff.
like I saw it, I saw the writing on the wall big time.
No, I get what you're saying. I mean, I could see, and because this is a very beloved film. I don't know. It's weird because I feel like this film was successful, but it feels like a cult film, and maybe I'm just reading that because that's what it's described as. But it's definitely hypnotic. I would describe the movie as hypnotic, especially the first act where they really like movies used to like get you into it. I mean, when he's stepping out and it has that whatever that disco funk version of Thus Spoke Zarathustra
Yeah,
is so funny.
yeah,
It's like he's awakening, he's
it
evolving.
really set the tone.
Yeah, but it's all like
Yeah, dude, I love that remix. I was like, this is so fitting, so funny.
oh yeah, no, I like it. It works perfectly. I know exactly what they're going for.
But
Um
also it means that like the way it's used in 2001 already had such a big influence on pop culture.
is a weird thing. And just the idea like do you know why, and if this is a condescending question, I apologize. But like, do you know why the song is called "Thus Spoke Zarathustra," or like "Also Spoke Zarathustra"? Okay,
Really?
that's a novel by Nietzsche, and it's all about the death of God and him talking about that and the Ubermensch. It's all that. That's where all
Okay,
that
yeah.
comes from, and it's so like I think it's kind of making fun of the idea of like philosophical enlightenment. Like he's supposedly being enlightened by like going out like exiting the Plato's allegory of the cave, all that like philosophy 101
Yeah.
shit. But it's making fun of that because his enlightenment he doesn't really get any. I don't know how enlightened he gets through this movie, or if it all passes through. Because again, like how much of this like information does he absorb? I think he definitely learns some stuff. He learns to care about other people more, and I think he is a caring guy. I think
He
you know,
definitely is. And I think that there's a payoff to that when he does say when um what's the rich man's name? Ben or
yeah,
yeah. When he
Ben.
passes, like his first thought is to I need to go tell what's her name about this. And then he does say, "Yes, I love her very much." And so he's able to say that about her
Mm-hmm.
when this guy who raised him, probably his old man, possibly, he just has no emotion when that guy dies. He doesn't
It's
even.
and that's another thing where you're trying to read. Like, it seems like he has no emotion. So was that guy just like not talking to him, not emotionally available, or
Yeah.
that thing where he's just like so out of reality, he's just like shut down, doesn't know what to do. You know, I
Yeah.
think I think it could be a little both.
I think so too.
Because I think like especially of that generation, I think a lot of parents were like a lot of dads specifically were like, it was my job to raise you and feed you and make sure you're taken care of, but like your emotional needs are not my responsibility as much. I
Yeah.
think that's especially true if you have this like weird locked in autistic grown man who's like still a child.
Yeah. And I like that it kind of, at first, it plays with the idea of like you figuring out what this guy's all about because it shows him watching like an orchestra and it seems sophisticated and elevated. Then it shows him watching like aerobics and then Sesame Street, and it's like, well,
right.
wait a minute, this guy just watches anything, and then you realize, okay, there's something off about this guy.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating that this man has been brought up by TV and only knows TV for 50 years, and so for him to walk out and pass a TV and for him himself to be on the TV is a very fascinating concept of like this guy thinks he's in the TV.
Yeah. No, it blows his mind.
Yeah.
Uh, and surely he has to have some idea of how TV is made with cameras and stuff, with like behind the scenes footage and seeing cameras on set and certain shows and stuff.
Maybe he tries to
Um,
turn it off.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, clearly, but also like I say that, but then he's trying to like change the channel when
Yeah.
the guy at the switchblade has him. So who knows? Who knows what this guy's thinking, or what he's able to think.
I'm glad it doesn't spin too much with the fish out of water stuff. It gets kind of to the point of he gets his leg crushed and then he's taken in by this rich lady in a limo.
Mhm.
And it's a hell of a first car to get into if you've never been in an automobile before. And
Yeah,
it just happens to have a TV in there because it's a
right.
rich
And to
car.
him, it's like, oh, all
Of
all
course it would.
TVs have, all cars have TVs because
Yeah,
of
of course it would.
that.
Why wouldn't
Um,
it?
I don't know. No, and it's such a funny, like, I don't know, it's such a funny thing, like comedy of errors. Like just kind of generic way of starting a story, like, oh, a rich man picks you, like Prince and the Pauper sort of thing, but like it's almost playing with that idea.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I guess there's like a subgenre of things where like an upper class person gets charmed by like the working class or middle class person, and this is an inversion of that,
Yeah.
you know, where it's like, okay, but does this middle class working class person have any value really, or are they just projecting their own value because they're empty inside themselves? um
There's also like
because
I
go ahead.
noticed there's some score, but not a lot. And what I noticed is when he's watching the TV as they get to the mansion, the complex, and it's that Basketball Jones music video. It's very urban, very in tune with what like that's his only awareness of like popular culture, like urban culture and stuff. And like to use that diegetic sound to score the rest of the scene, it's like, okay, yeah, his life is scored by TV. Technically, because he's been watching TV nonstop for 50 years, you could say his finger is on the pulse of the culture, whether he realizes it or not. He just has no way to synthesize it into, you
But
know.
even then, you're saying watching TV for 50 years, and Peter Sellers, what, he was born in 25. So in 79, he would have been like 54. But like, they didn't have TV back then.
Okay, well, radio and then TV, yeah.
Yeah. So like, what? Well, my question is, what was he doing before TV? Was he just gardening?
He was listening to the Little Orphan Annie radio
Yeah.
show, dude.
He had to be. He had to be doing something. You know,
Yeah.
he wasn't reading. He wasn't
Yeah.
sitting outside with other kids.
He was probably, dude, those first 10, 20 years were probably not much of anything. They probably
Yeah.
just kept him tucked away and he didn't do much. Maybe he followed their first gardener around or something, they probably had in the house and he kind
Right.
of picked up on it and enjoyed it.
It's one of those because that's the only greenery he ever sees.
Yeah.
And I don't know. There's something about that. I mean, because your early childhood stuff like that is so important. I mentioned earlier about that abused woman who like she never developed speech really, because like if you don't get that sort of stimulation where your brain is still young and plastic, whatever it is, like
Yeah.
it's very hard to develop certain things later. You know, um, that's why people read like Baby Einstein or to get those DVDs or
Yeah. My
whatever.
mom did Baby Einstein.
Yeah, clearly it worked.
It wasn't on me. It's on my sister who's going to be the first person in my family to finish college. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Well, there you go. That's a ringing endorsement. You guys can sponsor us.
But yeah, it was just like when he gets his well, also like before that, he even looks at that tree and tells that cop, "Hey, this tree's like diseased. It's got something wrong with it." And the cop's like, "Oh, okay, I'll take care of it." So he does know it, like to the level of knowing signs when a tree is like something's wrong with it. That's pretty cool. But
I mean, the whole thing is he does have this intuitive knowledge. He has intuition, but he's also oblivious at certain other things. So maybe he doesn't. I don't know. It's really hard.
yeah, but it was like up until this point, it's just more of like amusing to me. The first like genuinely like really funny and
Mhm.
cringeworthy moment is after he gets his leg checked out. And I do like, he's like, I don't know what a claim looks like. And
Yeah.
they tell him to stay here for a few days.
Mhm.
And of course, this rich guy who's sick has this whole doctor set up an x-ray and all this stuff. And one of the technicians is black. And of course, his first idea is, do you know Raphael? It's like, oh my God, dude.
Yeah, you guys all know each other. It's a terrible thing, man. I mean, even like, and I think this is saying something about like the way, not only the way black people are in society, but how they're depicted in media. At the time is like he, for example, later when he's like, "I'm sorry, do you have any food? I'm terribly hungry." He has that black woman with groceries,
Yeah.
like he's like, "Oh, this is like a black woman, like she'll take care of me,"
Yeah.
that sort of thing. Because these are the roles they're allowed to have in life and on TV. Um, it's just a thing. But no, it's crazy. He's getting his adrenochrome with Benjamin. Ben Rand. His last name is Rand, like Ayn Rand, I noticed. And Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged were already famous at this point. Because you have him. I don't know. It's a weird thing. They also, I appreciate they draw a line. So any movie made about rich people now, the rich people are just like unrepentantly evil. Because of the times we're living in.
Yeah.
Which makes I get it. I get it. But also it is interesting to like see this movie grapple kind of with the complexities of being that rich and likely old money, likely multi-generational. Like you don't have an estate like that outside DC without it being multi-generational, because it's like okay, I don't think Benjamin's a bad person. Like he's not like Mr. Burns, you know. He's
Yeah,
not like back there cackling. Um and he definitely like has no patience for people on welfare and stuff, but also like he wants to start a fund to help young businessmen. But then it's like it's only to help businessmen. And then also it's this thing where like I do always wonder like rich people who wait till the very end of their I mean the very end of their life to do charity. It's like how much is that out of a desire to help versus how much of that is just more egotism and a focus on legacy. You know what I mean?
sure.
Because I mean, you have like the Carnegie. He set up different libraries. Andrew Carnegie, you know, U.S. Steel, like set up all these things and centers after he died and stuff. But it's like, okay, but where was that money when you were alive? I know you have to make it at some point, but it's like George Lucas is, you know, he'll be around another 10 years probably or whatever. And like he's been given away as well. Same with like Bill Gates. But some of these guys, they just hold on to it or have pittance. Like I don't know, but it makes you wonder about Ben.
But that's the balance I did like, that he wasn't just some complete asshole rich snob, that you know, he does want to make that thing for business, and he gets up in arms when Chauncey like makes it sound like it's due to attorneys that he lost his business and stuff. So he, you know, he may have generational wealth, but at least he does care about these
Yeah.
people who are just trying to start up a business and stuff.
And also, dude, like rich people are weird. That's what this movie get like. If
Yeah.
you watch, there's this. I think it's called Being Rich. It's a documentary made by like a rich kid about rich people. I think Ivanka Trump is in it, among other people. Well, it's like growing up in that. Like, how do you have a regular life? Like, how? Of course, you're out of touch. Like, of course, all of that's happening. Of course, Eve is like and that's the thing, like she's actually very caring. She's like the most caring person, but it's also because she's so lonely because they're so secluded.
Yeah.
Because you just assume that everybody who's not already rich is just like wanting you for your money. Also, I do want to bring this up. I did some math, some arithmetic right before we started recording. So Melvyn Douglas, who plays Ben Rand in this, was born in 1901. So he's about 78 when this movie comes out. Shirley MacLaine, whom I love in The Apartment, by the way, Billy Wilder. I love that movie. Have you seen that movie?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good. Great. I guess it'd be a screwball comedy, but she's 42 in this compared to 78. She was born 37. So it's like this seems one of those like his second or third wife. He's like 58. She's like 22. She marries him because of course she does. Look at it. His place. And but she's even says later like I have no friends, all this stuff, you know. So like part of it was like genuine care and also wanting to avoid claims by having the doctor because if you take him to a hospital after hitting him, then they're going to ask questions and then you might get a police report filed or you know like it's going to be more of that versus like oh well we'll take you to my house to my personal doctor. So like even then, but like it doesn't feel entirely like there's ulterior. And they let him stay there rent free for like weeks.
It was just gonna be a couple days, but yeah, it's like everyone finds this guy to be a breath of fresh air, and that's why it just works out. And like to the point of where Ben wants Chansey to meet the president because the president's coming to talk to him because they're old friends.
Which is already a hilarious concept. Like it's insane. If I knew anybody for 2 days and like I wouldn't be like, hey, you should meet my friend the president. I would keep that very much under lock and key.
Well, yeah, it's just I also think this guy's just
Ben is almost more powerful than the president.
Yeah, and Ben is just the first time probably in a very long time that he's felt calm and comforted by a presence, and it must have been very powerful to him, which is I don't know. I like that aspect of
people
it.
make weird decisions at the end of his life.
Yeah.
He's like, dude, we're running out of adrenochrome. The Ukraine war doesn't start for another 40 years. Yeah. Like we can't get those babies off the battlefield, or whatever.
But yeah, it's just like the comedy of him like meeting the president and relating what he knows about gardening somehow being perceived as a intellectual metaphor. It's one of the funnier aspects of the movie to me.
Yeah, but and it's one of the, and this is another interesting thing is like, even though I think Chauncey has no real concept of the economy or what he's talking about. But is that good advice? Because it sounds good. It kind of sounds like sage advice. If an actual economist said it to you, you might be like, oh, there's different like seasons of the economy, which is true, I guess. There's ups and downs in the economy, and you do have to kind of accept that. But at the same time, like, this whole movie is like, everybody loves Chauncey because he speaks in sound bites, or they perceive him to speak in sound bites, because
Yeah.
they don't know it, but they're almost as shaped by TV as he is. They just don't realize it because they have other, inputs. Because he goes to that party and he's like, I don't read. And the guy's like, of course, who is the time? And he's like, I'll get you a ghostwriter and and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Or even the TV journalist being like, are you saying TV news is better? Which I took offense to as somebody raised by newspaper journalists and who prefers the written news. But
Yeah, but she's like, this is the first time I, as a reporter, have heard someone being as honest enough to say that they only watch TV. And
and
it's like,
people
okay.
do appreciate honesty. I mean, that's at least the perception of honesty, or telling it how it is like how we got our current president and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and it's one of the, I mean, there's so many like rules and unwritten rules in high society when you read about it. Cause like, old money is a different class than new money. And I said this when watching The Brutalist, like, when the rich at least used to, like in the Gilded Age and stuff, pretend to be high class and like care about the arts and like aesthetics and all this stuff. And now they don't even pretend. They're just like, yeah, we're just a bunch of rich, greedy bastards.
Yeah.
We're like ruin everything. But you almost like, it's a weird thing where like you almost need that old money social pressure to keep you in check, because of the way things are in bad taste. People are worried about that. But that's why he's so refreshing. Because especially imagine being in DC, dude. Even if you're not in politics, like if you're close to in any sort of like high society in DC, the amount of like bullshittery that you have to deal with, like, oh God,
Non-stop.
couldn't imagine. Nonstop. That's all it is.
At every angle, you're like having to weigh how your response might be perceived by a number of different people and agencies.
Yeah, exactly. So you just have to say that's why, and like, it's easy to make fun of them, but it's kind of like that in the corporate world too. It's funny. I was talking to you the other day. I have two part-time jobs right now. One of them is white collar and one of them is blue collar, and I have to like communicate completely differently in both of them. But it's like, if you're in the corporate world, like, it kind of gets that even at a lower level where you're just like, okay, what can I say and what makes me look good, and and like, and it drives people crazy. I mean, some people can deal with it. I obviously can't. I'm too big of a mouth. Um, but I don't know. I've also been appreciated for that though, except I'm not just talking about gardening the whole time.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like anytime I've been to a party where it's just like a bunch of college grads and like city sophisticated people, I'm like, well, you want to talk about I don't know, Eraserhead? I don't know. I feel like
City liberals, as you call them.
yeah, I only have like one or two little avenues. I'm like, I don't know. I feel like I'm uncultured, but then when I go outside of this space, I feel like I am pretty cultured.
No,
I
but
don't know.
there's definitely like a, I heard the term like NPR approved comedian the other day. Like, there's this certain, and I've listened to NPR. I listened to it a lot in college, but like, there's definitely this whole like, I'm cultured, but I'm cultured because I'm following, like, I'm like, oh, Hamilton, it's that. It's like major Hamilton stands. Um Although I don't think these people would be Hamilton stands. I think they would be very much like, woke. What is it? Woke,
Yeah.
Um, Who knows with these people?
To
Everybody does it. There's always a pissing contest. There's always things to keep up with. In your white, liberal circles, there's that, and then you have rednecks who have pissing contests about like, how big their truck is and stuff, and they gotta watch what they say. It's everything. And Chauncey cuts through all of that because he
yeah,
lives completely outside of it. People would be saying the same thing to him, I think, even if he was hanging out with a bunch of rednecks. Maybe. Well, I don't know. I say that, but then like it clearly didn't work on like in the hood, but part of that's a racial thing. But like, I don't know.
it's.
What would
Have you
this
seen Blast from the?
what would this guy be like if you put him in like a middle class or a working class environment? Is what I'm trying to imagine.
Yeah. Have you seen Blast from the Past?
No, I have not.
That's kind of plays off of this with what's his fucking name? Ben or fuck.
Brendan Fraser.
Brendan Fraser. Because he's like grew up in a bomb shelter for his first 30 years and then he comes up to the surface and it's completely ravaged LA, disgusting, like graffiti
Yeah,
everywhere.
and he thinks it's been a nuclear apocalypse or something.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
It's
I've
a
seen a
funny
similar
movie.
film Brendan Fraser was in called Encino Man, where he wakes up as a caveman and then like becomes the most popular guy at school. I like that one.
I'd say Blast from the Past is it's a fun one. It's not like it's something you could just throw on while you're doing shit, you know. Um,
Sure.
but I like that it takes a fair amount of time to like show him grow up the first 30 years. And but like yeah, like it's got to be I know you could just say, "Oh, this is just a fish out of water story," but like I really think that Blast from the Past might be influenced by this too in the way that like all Brendan Fraser knows is this specific media in this bomb shelter that he's grown up with for 30 years and bases it like everything around that.
Yeah.
So,
I'm gonna add another movie that we've covered as a parallel to this, Brigsby Bear. Brigsby
yeah.
Bear's a lot like, it's about a guy who is in a shelter and comes into the real world, and all he really knows is this one TV show.
Yeah.
That's all, and I don't know what fish out of water movies, preceded this that like led into this, but like whether even if the filmmakers don't know it, I feel like this
Yeah.
has seeped its way into the consciousness, like this archetype of story, because this is such a good version of it.
Yeah. I think I I guess kudos to Ben because he's fully aware and accepting that he's on death's door, he's dying, and he just straight up like gives his wife permission to go after Chansey and also like gets kind of excited by the thought of what the media might think of seeing them together and stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, wow.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. I don't know what he's thinking. If he just like wants to get, he's like, I'm not even doing a bit here, but he's like, I haven't been able to get it up for 20 years, so you deserve some like young man. Although the the housekeeper clearly doesn't like Chauncey. Because earlier she says, better find an old lady because you won't do a young one any good with that little thing of yours. You're always
Yeah.
gonna be a little boy, ain't you? She says that early in the movie. I'm like, dang, dude, you're just making fun of his Johnson to his face. He doesn't even know why. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think you would need a big Johnson for older women after they've spit out some kids, but that's just me. I don't know. I don't know what's happening.
But that's like the more like silly aspect of the movie is later on when he's eating breakfast in bed watching Mr. Rogers and she's trying to come on to him and stuff, slides into bed. The optics are crazy. He's like an iPad baby watching Coco Melon and like she can't stop kissing him and stuff
It's
and he's
crazy. Have you
trying to
have you
steal.
ever I don't even know the answer, can guess the answer. Have you ever had that thing where like a woman's making moves on you, but you're like watching something really good and you're like,
Oh, well, you know, to be the Kino Cowboy, you have to be locked in to a certain extent
yeah,
with
dude,
cinema.
you're making out. Was like, hold on, I gotta pause this. I don't want to miss this. Like,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, you know,
it's like,
sometimes things happen.
babe, I love you, but I love Peter Sellers more.
him having to like her kissing his face while he's watching cannot stop looking at Mr. Rogers is kind of fucked. It's like,
Of course, they pick Mr. Rogers of all things, talking about like friends. Oh, you're my friends. Because there's a couple times where, because throughout the whole, the running joke is he says people like, I like to watch TV. And so you have that later scene where she's pleasuring herself on the bearskin rug.
which is probably the most absurd moment of the movie.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. And I think some people think that's too much. It worked for me, for what it was, and it didn't go on too long.
It works mostly. I think him doing a handstand I almost thought was too much, but then there's such a build up and payoff because throughout the whole film he's mimicking the aerobics. So like there is a precedent there. So that did end up working for me. For a second I was like, okay, but there's too much of a setup. That I'm like, yeah, okay, I get what you're doing. That's fine.
It's ridiculous.
But
that woman's so
it's like it's interesting though that he feels like he needs to follow those instructions on the TV with the aerobics. It's really strange.
That's also how he learns how to kiss.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't know anything else,
He's like, oh, this does.
Which is a lot of like, I've read autistic people talking about like you have to have social scripts in your head for when certain things happen, and like I do think, I think it happens to everybody. Everybody kind of gets social scripts from TV or something, which is I think what this movie's trying to say. But also, it's like I do think there's like autistic people who like they get their ideas of like what certain social interactions are like from like TV and stuff and try to do it like that.
Yeah.
Or even I've talked about this before, like a lot of our modern conceptions of love is from movies, but like if you go back 200 years ago, the idea of romantic love as it is now was like didn't exist in its current form, like it was more practical, marriage and all that, on how it all influences. Art imitates life and life imitates art, that whole thing. I should run for president as well because I'm eloquent.
Well, she goes on that show because the vice president couldn't go on that late night show, and he gives a similar sort of spiel, and it works. But that's like I didn't think they would bring back the couple from the beginning of the movie. So when they did, for them to see him on TV, that was a good joke to me because they're like, "What the fuck is going on?
Who is this guy?"
Yeah. Like what an escalation from their point of view.
No, yeah, imagine if like your crazy rambling old man neighbor who's just like a hoarder, his house is on hoarders, just like, and he's on Dick Cavett or something. Like,
Yeah, it's like what the fuck.
Gotta be insane.
And like in a realistic movie, I think at this point he would have probably been interrogated pretty heavily by the FBI to see who the fuck this guy is. Because they have that meeting in the cabinet, like, okay, the FBI and CIA can't figure out who he is. And there's 13 different countries also trying to figure this out. It's like, oh my God. Now, I thought maybe like, would they, because they were able to trace his clothes, and it's like, maybe they'd be able to trace it back. But it was conveniently like, oh, well, this place went out of business. This other place was burned in a fire. But I thought they were going to get to a point where like, oh, this was his dad, and like his dad having to be some sort of significant figure or something. We figure that out. But it's interesting. I'm glad they didn't actually reveal any of that. They just kept it as it was.
Yeah, it's
that was interesting.
No, the less is definitely more in this movie.
Yeah.
God, I'm just going down. Oh, we see Peter Parker's landlord for 2 seconds. The pay me rent. Or
oh my God.
That
just clicked with me.
We see him like briefly at that party with the Russian dignitary. He's like one of the Russian. I don't even think he is. But he is there in this movie.
That it's also fascinating that they use Mr. Rogers was such like he was on TV for so long that he was on this movie from 1979, and I watched Mr. Rogers at the end of his show when I was a small kid. It's crazy to
Yeah.
think about. Like, it's so
And
bizarre to me.
and now millennials who can't grow up are still like watching them, or still like I've
Yeah,
seen
the
like
millennials that are like tearing up because Steve from Blue's Clues made a video saying, "Hey, everything will be okay."
after Trump won. Yeah, I was thinking of that same
It's like,
thing.
okay, dude.
It's like,
Emotionally stunted fucking people.
yeah, I don't need Steve from Blue's Clues to tell me like Kamala losing is
Oh my God, dude. Um,
losers.
Millennial cringe. Um, but I think Chauncey keeping this kind of like consistency with his character,
Mhm.
like I said, really hits the hardest when Ben finally does passes, and then we do see tears in his eyes when he's never probably had these tears before. And he has the understanding of death, and that he says, you know, he's seen this before and that it happens to all people. And that's such a simplistic thing to say, but yet even it's even working on me, the viewer. It sounds so profound that this simple guy was able to say this about death.
But it's one of those things. It's like, and that's part of the Rorschach test of this movie that makes it so good and has made it stand the test of time. Is like you're reading and you're like, well, is that deep? Like, is what he says about
Yeah.
gardening deep, or is it trite? And like, I think one of the things this movie, I think it has a lot to say about like how people are easily hooked by platitudes and political sound bites and stuff. Which it's crazy they talk about that, and I mean it's only gotten worse. Now we're on TikTok, let alone not even TV.
Yeah.
But the movie's called Being There. It's about being present, and I do think it like is on the side of Chauncey having some wisdom. It's definitely making fun of people for reading too much into it, but like I also think the movie is saying like sometimes the truth is simple, and like sometimes
Yeah.
truisms are truisms because they're true, stuff like that. And I mean that's something I don't know. As I get older, it's like certain things that used to like strike me as cheesy, like It's a Wonderful Life or something, like ring more true now because even though they are kind of like simple messages, like those are the important ones.
The messages that have withstanded the test of time and speak to you on primal levels often.
Right. Yeah, I
Totally.
mean, it's like if somebody says money doesn't buy happiness, is that cliche? Yes. Is it true? Kind of. I mean,
It certainly helps.
not being poor
Yeah.
is you don't got to be rich, but like not being poor definitely helps not
Yeah.
buy happiness.
I also find it interesting at this point, the doctor of the house, at this point, he says, I understand now. After asking Chauncey if he's an actual like gardener and stuff. Because the whole movie, he's the only one that's kind of thinking this guy's iffy. There's something off about him. He's suspicious.
He's the
Checks his,
smartest guy because he's a
he,
doctor. He has a real
yeah, he checks his clothes and stuff. And I think this is like the revelation. He really like realizes, okay, this guy's actually a simpleton, but he's he's gotten a very soft spot because Ben says that Chauncey being around made dying easier. And he's like let go of this suspicion. But also it's like confirms like, yeah, I think this guy's actually just a simpleton and everyone's gonna has been fooled, but I'm not gonna say shit about it because he brings so much happiness to all these people,
right.
which I think is cool.
And I always wonder if the doctor like somehow resents these other people, or I mean, he's probably paid very well. Or for a minute there, I thought there might be like a subplot where he was poisoning Ben, like he was
Whoa.
like in on it, but that didn't happen. Um, I don't know. Is an interesting thing.
The the most absurd joke of the film is at the funeral when Ben's dead and the president's speaking and the pallbearers are like agents of the president, but they're they decide that Chauncey might be their only asset with the president seeing like a successor and stuff, and it's like, oh my God, dude. And it's like the all-seeing eyes above them and stuff as they're carrying the body up and stuff. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah. It's and the pallbearers, like, are they connected to the president or to Ben or to both? Like, who are
Both.
the people? It's just kind of like a high society, not quite
Yeah.
Illuminati sort of thing. And they're talking about, I mean, yeah. And that's how it is. Like I'm pretty sure the parties can just kind of elect whoever they want. I mean, they certainly push certain people. They push Hillary over Bernie in 2016, something like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's definitely like the biggest, most damning satirical point in the movie. But I don't know. Is it that outrageous?
It's certainly funny to me, but in the most beautiful way possible, it's undercut by Chauncey just wandering off during the funeral and nonchalantly walking around, and then even more nonchalantly just walking onto the lake
Mhm.
and walking on the water. And
Right.
he's intrigued by this, and he dips his cane into the water to see what's going on, and it goes in. So
Yeah, but it doesn't go in where he was walking exactly.
yeah. So
What do you make of that ending?
what I make of it is, first of all, the final audio is the president saying life is a state of mind.
Mhm.
And I don't think that it's just aggressively trying to say that he's a Christ figure. I think more so that he didn't fall into the water because he didn't even realize that it was a possibility, and
Mhm.
that he's not limited by this. And in his mind, therefore, it didn't happen. That's
That
just
I really like that reading. I like that reading. That's probably my favorite reading of the movie I've seen. Is like he's so innocent that like he doesn't even know he can drown.
yeah. That's how I read it.
Um, no, I definitely view it as like he's so innocent that he has like this almost Christ-like innocence or like sinlessness, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and then he's so light and unburdened that he's able to walk on water.
Yeah.
I don't think he's literally magical or Jesus or
No.
anything
No.
by the end of it. Because I did watch like the alternate ending, which is where he like fixes that pine tree that's had some branches fall on it, which is beautiful because he cares about the plants. And then Eve was like, "I've been looking for you," and then he's like, "I've been looking for you too," and they walk off, and that's the ending. And I'm like,
Okay.
and the ending we got, I think, is much better.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because at least it makes people talk. Also, I'm gonna point this out: Eve, garden,
Oh yeah. Fuck.
garden of
God
yeah.
damn it.
I don't know what. I guess because she's just kind of like almost like a generic
She's
like
nurturing.
woman, yeah, nurturing woman figure. Um, I don't know. She's not like stealing apples and like getting kicked out of paradise and stuff. Like, so I don't know exactly what the importance is going to be, or sometimes things it's just drawing like point A to point B. It's just making them closer together by making those little connections. It's like we're just associating these two characters more closely by having them have like names that are related. I don't know if it means much.
Okay. Well, yeah. Certainly, I didn't even put that together though. I don't know. I've heard the name Eve so much that it's sometimes lost meaning to me. Adam, Eve. It was kind of like when we were talking about Interstellar and you didn't think about Dr. Man. It's just like sometimes that things just slip by and you're like,
Oh
oh
yeah,
wait,
yeah. Sometimes things definitely slip by me all the time. Things like that.
yeah.
Um, what do you think of the blooper reel that plays during the end
Hmm.
credits?
I like it, but I also see Peter Sellers the way he talked about and thinking that like it undercut kind of the mystique of the character. So I'm kind of split on it, really.
I'm generally I think it's interesting, and I think it was like a nice little palate cleanser at the end. But at the same time, I tend to agree with Peter that it does undercut the tone and the ending a bit. Now, Peter Sellers also thinks like it cost him his Oscar, but the person who won the Oscar was Dustin Hoffman for Kramer versus Kramer.
Hmm.
And then Meryl Streep won Best Supporting Actress for Kramer versus Kramer, and Kramer versus Kramer won Best Picture that year.
Okay.
So I don't feel like that would be the make or break for. I mean, maybe I don't know, but it seems like it was clearly Kramer versus Kramer was.
I feel like maybe they could have like done traditional credits and then about a minute in bring up the bloopers
do
on
a
the
mid
side.
credit scene, but they go straight into it.
Straight into it is more of like a wacky comedy kind of thing, like Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back kind of thing.
Right.
90s comedies, stuff like that. I'm like, okay, whatever. I mean, it was cool to see him try and get that line out because it's like
I think it also somewhat dispels the myth of Peter Sellers as like being completely in character. It's like, okay, clearly he's breaking character to like whenever people talk about method acting, whatever that even means,
yeah.
like, oh man, they're always in character. But like, okay, clearly he's not. And I do want to, so I saw an interview with the author Kosiński, who apparently Kosiński is the surname that his family adopted while being persecuted by Nazis. So, according to him, around the age of 6, upon the outbreak of World War II, he was separated from his parents, wandered through Poland and Russia, living by his wits, and he became mute and did not regain his speech till 1947. But it was later revealed that he had remained with his parents during the war. So I don't know how much of this is bullshit or not. But the idea that the author himself became mute for several years as a result of trauma, like, makes it way more interesting for like Chauncey being who he is, not knowing how to communicate, kind of wandering around.
Yeah, makes me think of like I don't know, the way those kids are in Empire of the Sun when the parents are like trying to find them and stuff and they've just like they're all quiet and stuff like that. I don't know. It's like, yeah. I could totally see where that could have. Yeah, that's interesting as hell.
Mm. No, so it's like how much is Chauncey inspired by your real experience? But I haven't read the book. I don't know how different it is, but I think in the book he's more like explicitly mentally disabled. The book just explains more as it often does.
Yeah.
But I don't know. But also he might just lied about being mute. It sounds like, so who knows?
What a great line the movie walks, though. That's
Yeah,
what I appreciated.
no,
Probably
the,
the most.
the absolute tightrope walk of the movie. Masterful.
Yeah. Okay. Final thoughts. I already gave my final
I
thoughts.
gave my final thoughts.
Okay, cool. All right. Being there. Thanks for listening, everybody. Next week, I'm not sure what we're doing. But if you want to support us, we got almost 180 episodes of this. New video essay out now. You can check that out along with like 9 others. If you want something different from the harbor, I mean, we have multiple outlets, all kinds of stuff you can check out. Support me if you want. Buy my book. Follow Scott at Scott K Comedy. Follow me at The Mooring Line. Other than that, I guess we'll see you guys next week.